I never thought much about walking someone to their door until the night Theo did it for me. Actually, that's not quite true. I'd walked plenty of people to their doors before. Friends, dates that went nowhere. That girl from sophomore year who I tried so hard to feel something for. But this was different. This was the first time someone walked me to my door, waited while I fumbled with my keys in the dim porch light, and then stood there on the sidewalk until my apartment light came on. That small gesture, that patient waiting in the November cold, changed everything. I should probably back up and explain how we got there. Because the walking to the door thing, it wasn't just about being polite or safe. It was the culmination of 3 months of me slowly unraveling every assumption I'd ever made about myself. I met Theo at the advertising agency where I'd just started working. I was 26, fresh off what I called my quarter-life crisis, but what my therapist called a necessary period of self-reflection. I'd quit my first job out of college, moved to a new city, and decided I was going to figure out who I actually was instead of who I thought I should be. Very dramatic, I know. But at 26, after spending my entire adult life feeling like I was wearing someone else's clothes, it felt revolutionary. Theo worked in the design department. I was in copywriting. Our desks weren't near each other, but the agency was small enough that everyone knew everyone. I noticed him my first week, but not in the way I'd later notice him. He was just this guy with dark hair that always looked slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it too many times while working. He wore a lot of grey and black, had this quiet intensity about him, and from what I could tell, he was really good at his job. The first time we actually spoke was in the break room. I was making my third coffee of the day, which was excessive even for me, and he walked in with his headphones around his neck, still playing music loud enough that I could hear the bass line. "What are you listening to?" I asked, just to make conversation, just because the silence felt too heavy. He pulled out his phone and showed me. Some indie band I'd never heard of. "They're playing at the Moroccan Lounge next month," he said. His voice was quieter than I expected, almost soft. "You into live music?" "I used to be," I said, which was true. I used to do a lot of things before I got so caught up in trying to be the right kind of person that I forgot what I actually enjoyed. "We should go sometime," he said casually, like it was the easiest thing in the world to invite a coworker you barely knew to a concert. The agency crew goes out pretty regularly. That casual invitation became coffee runs, which became lunch at the taco truck down the street, which became staying late at the office, working on a joint project our creative director assigned us. Theo was easy to be around. He didn't fill every silence with noise. He listened when I talked. Really listened. And he had this way of looking at me when I was explaining an idea that made me feel like what I was saying actually mattered. I didn't think anything of it at first. I'd had close guy friends before. I'd had that intense kind of friendship where you talk about everything and nothing, where you develop inside jokes and text each other random thoughts at 2 in the morning. This felt like that, I told myself. Just a really good friendship forming. But then there was the day he brought me coffee without me asking. He just showed up at my desk with my usual order, oat milk latte with an extra shot, and set it down while I was deep in trying to write headlines for a campaign that was going nowhere. "You looked like you needed this," he said. I looked up at him, and something in my chest did this weird flip. He was wearing this charcoal sweater that made his eyes look even darker than usual, and he had that slight smile he got when he was being thoughtful, and I realized with sudden, uncomfortable clarity that I'd been looking forward to seeing him every single day, that I timed my coffee breaks, hoping to run into him, that I'd started dressing a little better for work, taking more care with my hair, and I'd been telling myself it was about professional growth or some bullshit like that. "Thank you," I managed to say, and he just nodded and walked back to his desk. and I sat there staring at that coffee cup like it held answers to questions I wasn't ready to ask. That night, I lay in bed and forced myself to think about it. Really think about it. I'd always considered myself straight. I'd dated women. I'd had relationships, even if they never quite felt right. Even if there was always this disconnect I couldn't name. I'd chalked it up to not having met the right person yet, to being too focused on my career, to a dozen other explanations that let me avoid looking too closely at the truth. But lying there in the dark, I let myself remember. The way I'd felt about my best friend in high school. How I'd convinced myself it was just admiration. The guys I'd noticed in college. How I'd told myself I was just appreciating aesthetics. The relationships with women that felt like I was going through motions, reading from a script everyone else seemed to know by heart. And now, Theo. The way my heart sped up when I saw his name on my phone. The way I noticed everything about him. The way he bit his lower lip when he was concentrating. The way his laugh sounded different when it was genuine versus polite. The way he rolled up his sleeves when he was working on something important. I wasn't straight. The realization didn't come like lightning. It came quiet and certain, like something I'd always known, but had been too afraid to acknowledge. I wasn't straight, and I was developing very real, very intense feelings for Theo. The panic came next. What did this mean for everything I thought I knew about myself? What about my family? My friends back home? The future I'd always vaguely imagined? But underneath the panic was something else. Relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. The next few weeks were probably the most confusing of my life. I was hyper-aware of Theo all the time. Every interaction felt loaded with meaning. When our hands brushed, reaching for the same document, I felt it for hours afterward. When he laughed at something I said, I wanted to memorize the sound. When he texted me on the weekend just to share a funny tweet, I read it probably 20 times. I had no idea if he felt anything similar. He was friendly with everyone at the agency. He was kind and thoughtful by nature. Maybe the coffee thing was just who he was. Maybe I was reading into things, seeing what I wanted to see. But then there was the Halloween party. The agency rented out a bar, and everyone came in costume. I went as a character from a video game, put actual effort into it for once. Theo showed up as some noir detective, and he looked unfairly good in the vintage suit he'd found. We ended up on the bar's back patio, away from the noise and the crowd. It was one of those perfect October nights, cool, but not cold. The city lights blurred and soft around us. We were talking about nothing important. Just the easy conversation we'd fallen into. And at some point I realized we'd moved closer together. Our shoulders were almost touching. I could smell his cologne, something woody and subtle. "Can I tell you something?" he said, and his voice had changed. Had this nervous edge I'd never heard before. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Yeah, of course." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his expression that made me forget how to breathe. "I really like spending time with you," he said. "Like, more than I probably should, given that we work together." "I like spending time with you too," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. "Yeah," he said, but his eyes were searching mine, looking for something. "I mean, I really like it. I look forward to it. To seeing you." We were standing so close now. Someone inside laughed loudly, breaking the moment, and Theo stepped back, ran his hand through his hair in that way he did when he was nervous. "Sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have said that. We work together, and I don't want to make things weird." "You're not," I said quickly. "Making things weird? I mean, you're not. I like spending time with you too. Really like it. He smiled then, this small, genuine smile that made his whole face change. "Okay," he said. "Good." We went back inside after that. But something had shifted. There was an acknowledgement now, unspoken but real. We were both feeling something, both aware of the other person in a way that went beyond friendship. The next week, he asked if I wanted to go to that concert he'd mentioned months ago. Just us, not the agency crew. And I said yes before I could overthink it. The concert was incredible. But honestly, I barely remember the music. I remember standing next to Theo in the crowd, our arms pressed together because the venue was packed. I remember the way he leaned close to say something in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. I remember thinking that I'd never felt more awake, more present, more absolutely certain that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After the concert, we walked to a diner that was still open, sat in a corner booth, and talked until the waitress started giving us pointed looks. We talked about everything. Our families, our fears, our dreams. The things we were still figuring out about ourselves. Theo told me he'd known he was gay since he was 14, that coming out had been hard but necessary, that he'd learned to trust himself, even when it scared him. I told him about my realization, about the past few months of questioning everything. I was terrified he'd think I was confused, or experimenting, or not taking it seriously enough. But he just listened, his dark eyes steady on mine. And when I finished, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you for telling me," he said. That took courage. His hand was warm, his fingers slightly calloused from his design work, and I looked down at our hands together and felt something slot into place inside me. We left the diner around 2 a.m. Theo insisted on driving me home even though it was out of his way. We sat in his car outside my apartment building, neither of us quite ready for the night to end. "I should let you get some sleep," he finally said. "Yeah," I said, but I didn't move. He smiled. "Can I take you out again? Like properly take you out?" "I'd really like that," I said. I got out of the car, and that's when it happened. He got out too, walked around and fell into step beside me. I live on the 2nd floor, so it's not like I had far to go, but he walked me to the building entrance, up the stairs, right to my door. I turned to say goodnight, and he was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. "Good night," I said. "Good night," he said back. "Text me when you're inside." "I will," I promised. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and went to turn on the light. That's when I glanced out my window and saw him, still standing there on the sidewalk, looking up, waiting, making sure I got inside safely, making sure my light came on, making sure I was home. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary gesture, but standing there in my dark apartment, looking down at him waiting in the November cold, I felt it all crash over me. This was real. What I felt for him was real. And he felt something too, enough to wait in the cold just to know I was safe. I turned on the light, and even from the 2nd floor, I could see his smile. He waved, a small gesture, and then he walked back to his car. I texted him immediately. "I'm inside. Thank you for tonight. Q for..." His response came seconds later. "Thank you. Sleep well." I didn't sleep well. I barely slept at all. I lay in bed replaying every moment, every word, every look. I thought about his hand in mine at the diner. I thought about the way he'd listened when I talked about figuring myself out. I thought about him standing on the sidewalk, waiting for my light. The next morning I woke up to a text from him. "Coffee before work?" We met at the place near the office, and when I walked in and saw him already there, already smiling at me, My heart did that flip again. But this time, I let myself feel it. I let myself acknowledge what it meant. Over the next few weeks, we fell into something I can only describe as the most natural thing I'd ever experienced. We went on actual dates. Dinner at small restaurants where we sat too long talking. A museum on a Sunday afternoon where we wandered through exhibits and he explained design principles I'd never thought about. A bookstore where we got lost in different sections and kept finding each other again. We held hands. That was huge for me, holding hands with a guy in public. The first time Theo reached for my hand while we were walking, I tensed up, looked around, waited for someone to say something. But no one cared. No one even noticed. And Theo just squeezed my hand gently and kept walking. Kept talking about whatever story he'd been telling, giving me space to adjust to this new reality. We kissed for the first time on our 5th date. We were at his place, watching a movie neither of us was paying attention to. I was hyper-aware of how close we were sitting, of his arm along the back of the couch, of the way he kept glancing at me during the quiet scenes. During a particularly boring part of the movie, I turned to say something, and he was already looking at me. The words died in my throat. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and his voice was soft, uncertain in a way that made him even more endearing. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and he leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to change my mind. When his lips met mine, it was gentle and careful and absolutely perfect. Every kiss I'd ever had before had felt like I was performing, following some choreography I'd memorized. This felt like coming home. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay," I agreed, and we both laughed, and then we were kissing again, and everything else fell away. Being with Theo taught me what it felt like to be fully present in a relationship. There was no disconnect, no feeling of going through motions. When I was with him, I was completely there, completely myself. He saw me, really saw me, in a way no one ever had before. We told our friends at the agency after about 2 months. Most of them weren't surprised. Apparently we'd been obvious, which was both embarrassing and kind of wonderful. Our creative director just nodded and said she was happy for us, and to please keep our relationship drama out of client meetings, which was fair. Telling my family was harder. I called my mom on a random Tuesday night, my heart racing, Theo sitting next to me on the couch for moral support. I told her I was seeing someone, that his name was Theo, that I was happy. There was a pause. Then she said, "Tell me about him." We talked for an hour. She asked questions, real questions about who he was and what he did and how we met. She didn't ask about labels or what this meant about my past or any of the things I'd been terrified she'd focus on. She just wanted to know about the person who was making her son happy. Later, she'd tell me she'd had her suspicions, that a mother knows, all those cliches. But in that moment, she just listened and asked about Theo. And when we hung up, I cried from relief. My dad took longer to come around, but he did. My sister was immediately supportive, demanded to meet Theo as soon as possible, and then proceeded to grill him like a protective older sibling should. Watching them all together at my birthday dinner a few months later, seeing Theo fit so naturally into my family, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. But it's the small moments I remember most. The way Theo always made sure I ate when I got too focused on work. The way he'd text me photos of dogs he saw on his lunch walks. The way he listened to me talk about my writing. Even the bad drafts. And always found something encouraging to say. The way he'd reach for my hand while we were watching TV. Absent-minded and natural. The way he'd kiss my forehead when he left for work in the morning. And every single time he dropped me off at my place, he'd walk me to the door. Every single time he'd wait on the sidewalk until my light came on. It became our thing, this small ritual that meant so much more than just being polite. One night, about 6 months into our relationship, I asked him about it. We were lying in his bed, my head on his chest, his fingers running through my hair. "Why do you always wait for the light?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "My dad used to do it for my mum," he finally said. "Every time they went anywhere, he'd walk her to the door and wait until she was inside. He said it was about making sure she was safe, but it was also about those extra few seconds of connection. Like, I'm here until you're there. You're not alone in the transition." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "I love you," I said, and it was the first time I'd said it out loud. But it felt right, felt true. He pulled me closer. "I love you too," he said. "So much." That was almost 2 years ago now. We've been through a lot since then. We moved in together last spring, found a place with big windows and enough room for both our stuff. We adopted a cat who's currently asleep on my lap as I think about all of this. We've had fights and makeups, stressful work weeks and lazy Sunday mornings, family gatherings and quiet nights at home. But Theo still walks me to the door when we've been out separately. If I get home before him, he texts when he's inside. If he gets home before me, I do the same. And sometimes, just because, I'll stand at our window and wait until I see his light come on across the apartment, and I'll think about that November night when everything changed. Because that's what love is, isn't it? It's the big declarations and the grand gestures, sure. But it's also the waiting in the cold to make sure someone gets inside safely. It's the extra few seconds of connection. It's the quiet assurance that you're not alone in the transition from one moment to the next. I never thought much about walking someone to their door until Theo did it for me. Now I think about it all the time. I think about how one small gesture of care can change everything. How being seen, really seen, by another person can help you see yourself more clearly. How love, real love, is both the enormous revelation and the tiny daily choice. Theo just got home. I can hear his keys in the door, his footsteps in the hallway. In a moment, he'll come in and kiss me hello, ask about my day. Probably steal some of my coffee even though he has his own. It's ordinary and domestic and absolutely everything I never knew I needed. But before that, I watch him through the window. He looks up, sees me watching, and smiles. That same smile from 2 years ago, from every day since. And I think about how lucky I am, how grateful I am that I finally let myself acknowledge who I was, what I wanted, who I could love. The light is on. I'm home. And so is he. Total char count, 24,847.